The constantly recurring story, the Lakers interested in Andrew Wiggins. Let me know if you've heard that one before over the course of the summer. Also, what is going on with Ben Simmons? I mean, there's been some interesting reports about him potentially being done playing basketball, rejecting an offer from a team, potentially going back to Philadelphia, and more. So we're going to cover all of that in today's video. But first, make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe here to the Basketball Bulletin, where Trevor Lane and I keep you guys informed on all of the information around the NBA as it comes out. I wanted to start this video off by saying, because I know we got a lot of Laker fans here, of course. Are you interested in Andrew Wiggins? Let me know in the comments down below. So, Wiggins is a good player overall, just in general. That's not shocking news, not a hot take. I think he's a player that would fit really well alongside Luka. I think he is a guy that would slot perfectly as your third option or fourth option, wherever you see fit. And I think it's more so fourth. But he could be a guy that gets hot every now and again, or maybe you're missing a player, and he can be your second option on a given night because Luka is going to be so stat dominant, heliocentric, all that stuff. And you just need 17, 18, 19 points from your second option a lot of nights, I think, with Luka having the ball in his hands, especially if you're missing a player. And so Wiggins, I think there's a very high ceiling if you add Wiggins to this team. He's the guy that could be your primary defensive wing in your starting lineup. I mean, the starting lineup is kind of weird as projected because they don't really have a guy that can be your primary defensive assignment out there for the bigger wings. And that's why a lot of Laker fans want either Vando or, more importantly, Smart to be in the starting group. And Wiggins, I think, would be a guy that could slot in there. Wiggins, Rui, LeBron, Luka, all these guys want to kind of be on the slower, bigger forward out there as opposed to being on the primary wing out there, like a Tatum or something like that. I think you could put a guy like Wiggins out there, and he's not going to stop those guys, but he'd be able to hang and keep up with them and just generally play better defense more consistently than those other guys would. LeBron can pick it up, but he's going to really pick and choose his spots. And Rui, I think, guards up a bit better than down, because he's a big, strong dude. And so that's the Lakers kind of could really use another player like him. And maybe a couple years from now, Laravia is that. Maybe Laravia is that this year. Who knows? But Thiero, maybe a couple years from now, he's that, things like that. But I think right now we know Wiggins, he's a surefire thing. There are two question marks or concerns with him. Firstly, he's already 30. That's not a bad thing. It's not like that's old. That's certainly not old, right? But the question is, with him being 30 already, does he age out of Luka's timeline relatively quickly? Is he going to hit the cliff at 32? I don't know. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes guys age into 35, 36 before they start to really show good decline. I don't know, right? Ultimately, that is something we would have to consider. I do think he has some stickiness to his game, like being able to shoot, 36, 37, 38% on decent volume is solid, right? He can play make a little bit, good athlete. Things like defense, athleticism, those will decline. But I think he could still be a guy you could slot out there at a reasonable amount of money, not at 30 million, but at a decent amount of money, 3 years from now, so on and so forth. And at worst case scenario, you could also maybe potentially flip him at that point if you're LA and he's on your roster. But then the big question mark here is the salary piece. Now, I don't necessarily think, I think it's a slight overpay, 28 to 30. Maybe he's more of a 24, 25 guy, but okay. I'm not really too mad about that, but he earns 28 this year and then has a 30 million player option this offseason. So the Lakers are actually really, really in a spot where they value that flexibility. They really value the flexibility that they will have in the coming offseason after LeBron is basically a free agent. What I think they'll do, I've said this before, is I think they'll take that flexibility and they'll do other things they need to do. They need to re-sign AR. They're probably going to re-sign Rui. I believe he's eligible as well. But they're going to take that, do what they need to do, and I think they're going to do some shopping, see if they can pull off a big trade for maybe not a star. They could certainly try that, but maybe not a star, but maybe a guy they think could fit great alongside Luka and Austin for the long haul. And then I think they'll take whatever's left of that, let's say 25, for example, and say, LeBron, we're better now, but we don't have a max cap space. What would you be okay with taking what we have left, and we can really have a serious chance to win this year, right? I think that's probably what their plan is this offseason, barring any in-season trades or anything like that. I think that's probably their plan. And if they win, then they'll probably just say, hey, LeBron, here's your max again, right? But the question here, aside from that stuff, is do you think Wiggins is the guy that will put you over the top to get you an NBA championship? I think a lot of that depends on health. I think a lot of that depends on health of other teams. I think a lot of that depends on Luka. Right. A lot of people are projecting Luka to have this MVP season and be extremely good. And certainly if they're able to do that and remain being one of the top seeds, I would have them certainly in that contention. And especially if they're able to make it through the season with the healthy LeBron. Last couple seasons, he's been kind of sustaining injuries later in the season, unfortunately. If they're able to get to the playoffs with a healthy LeBron, seriously, I think they could be really good. But do you think Wiggins is the guy that helps you do that stuff, that gets you over the hump, right? So that's the real consideration there. So we're going to talk a little bit more, but let's go ahead and get a word from our sponsors in here.
Our great presenting sponsor for the Basketball Bulletin is Sleeper. If you've never heard of the Sleeper app, or more likely you have, here's a little secret. It is more than just a platform for season-long fantasy leagues. This year, there's millions of users playing fantasy sports on Sleeper, but the app offers so much more than just that. They have live stats, real-time updates, and visualizations on all stats, something I use every day, the news feed. Get lightning-fast updates on your favorite players and teams, and a real-time chat where you can engage with other users about individual plays and performances during the NFL and NBA season. So download the Sleeper app today. I made a couple of picks here on Sleeper. I'm fired up for the NFL season. I like on the season, Tyler Warren, the rookie with the Colts, more than 550.5 receiving yards. I think he's going to be a really important target for Daniel Jones. And then Zach Charbonnet. Yes, this means I don't think Ken Walker is going to stay healthy the entire season. Zach Charbonnet, 499.5 rushing yards. I think he will be involved in that offense, and he will eclipse that. So make sure you guys do check out the Sleeper app if you agree with me, or if you don't agree with me. Check it out. Either way.
Don't forget to enter promo code Bulletin as well upon sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you, Sleeper, for sponsoring today's video. But yeah, I think that's a thing. Now, another piece to this, of course, is the Miami Heat side of this. Are they ready to play ball? I think they've got some decisions to make with their roster. Ultimately, I don't know that they're kind of like in this weird in-between area, despite the fact that the East is missing a couple of teams. They're not at a point where they're able to make that jump yet. Certainly not, right? But do they want to play ball, right? What are they going to do? Are they going to try to make it like midway through the season and then deal Wiggins? What is the goal here with Miami? Ultimately, I think that needs to be something that is considered here. And I said that this was something that had popped up before because we had been hearing about this basically since the start of the offseason. And one of the things that popped up was you heard that, they had declined, or there was a rumored offer out there anyway, of like Dalton Connect, Rui Hachimura, things like that in the first round pick. That's what they want back from the Lakers. And that's kind of a lot. That's like everything you have. And you're giving up a good player in Rui. Like, that's a lot to give up. So it depends on what the asking price is. Of course, maybe you can get another team involved in there to pull something off. But ultimately, that is something to consider because I think he would fit great alongside Luka. I really do. I think he's one of the types of guys. There's a lot of guys that fit great, but he's one of the types of guys you could put around Luka, and he could be really good in that spot. And he would be a nice fit. So moving on, let's talk about Ben Simmons here. A guy that wouldn't be a nice fit, particularly around Luka, but I guess moving on. Ben Simmons rejected a contract offer from the Knicks. Yeah, there was reports about the Knicks being interested in Ben Simmons like a couple weeks ago. We never really heard much about that. The league sources said that the Knicks indeed offered a 1-year contract to Ben Simmons that the former All-Star passed on. New York is limited to minimum contract offers as training camp draws near, and Simmons entered the summer hopeful of securing a contract above the minimum after he split last season between the Nets and the Clippers. Yeah, that was a thing too. There was a report earlier in the offseason that he was hoping to get above a minimum. There was also the same deal with Russell Westbrook. But Ben, I thought, was interesting because I thought he was pretty good in LA. He still has his same deficiencies. I mean, like, that's still a thing. That's not going anywhere. He's not going to be somebody that's going to be shooting the ball, certainly not from three, but he'll get to the rim and still pass. Like, he's not going to put the ball in the basket much. I mean, it is what it is. But with that in consideration, I mean, look at the last year totals. He still put up, 5.5 assists, 5 rebounds, 5 points. Played solid defense, was switchy for them, has good size. Like, I think despite the offensive limitations, I think that he's the type of guy you could still plug into your rotation and get good, meaningful minutes from. The Clippers use him as a bit of like a secondary playmaker, small ball 5 type of guy. And I think if you put a lot of like spacing around him, that can work because he can still be pretty versatile on defense. He's not anywhere near the defender he was back in the early days of Philadelphia, but I thought he was pretty good. I mean, his percentages did go down in terms of like scoring, but he didn't really score much in the first place. I mean, he was averaging 3 points for the Clippers. So is he a minimum player giving you 5, 5, and 5? Probably. I think it's decent. Maybe it could be a tick above, but probably in today's NBA, he's about a minimum guy, especially with the deficiency of the offensive end and where you're basically playing 4-on-5. And you know that the worst thing is if you knew he would finish strong at the rim all the time, sometimes he does, of course, but if you knew every time you gave him a cut, you hit him cutting and he was going to put that ball up there, that would be one thing. But you could literally watch him do the Steve Nash dribble all the time. And it's like, bro, we don't need that. You're right there. You got a layup. Put it up, bro. Put it up. So unfortunately, that is still a thing. But I am an advocate of Ben. I think he's a guy that should certainly still be in the NBA, but he wanted more money. And so he declined an offer from the Knicks. That doesn't mean that, I don't know that their roster is full yet, but assuming it's not, that doesn't mean he can't maybe hit them up and say, hey, I would still like to come back. And I think that'd be a good opportunity for him. And that would be a good spot for him to try to maybe recoup some value. The problem is that once you take these minimum deals as an NBA player, it's extremely hard to get off of them. And I think that's one of the things he was really hoping to do, is just not have to take a minimum salary. And similarly, by extension, Russ is in a very similar spot where, like, a lot of things I said about Russ quite literally, or Ben quite literally, extend to Russ. It's pretty uncanny, actually. Except I think Ben is bigger, so I think there's more value in being bigger, but Russ, I think, is better. I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, very similar things where Russ declined that option, wanted to stick around on more money, didn't get that offer, unfortunately. But Ben is in a spot where that happened. But there's more than that. So Fisher reported yesterday there have been some overtures, I would say, between Ben Simmons and the Sixers once he secured a buyout from Brooklyn. So this is back in the Brooklyn period. He still has some friends in the area. I believe his brother was living in Philly at the time, and there was some interest in Philly at that point in time. But I can't say I have any updated information on the Sixers' interest in Ben there. And I do think Embiid and Ben have repaired the type of fracturing that went down behind the scenes as well. So could that potentially be a destination for Ben Simmons at some point? That's certainly on the table. They talked about it. You know, they considered it. It didn't wind up happening, of course, because he winds up going to the Clippers. But that is something that was certainly on the table for him. Is that another opportunity, right? Is that another opportunity for Ben Simmons? There was also a report about 4 days ago that he's no longer being represented by the same people. And typically that doesn't really happen if an athlete is still trying to be active, because there was also a report that he's considering retiring. So I think we're just kind of in this weird spot with Ben. Who knows what's ultimately going to wind up happening? I guess time will tell, but it's certainly pretty confusing. And I do think that for some of these guys, there's just not going to be a lot of options out there. They are going to have to settle a little bit. Like, for example, back to Russ, it seems like it's Kings or bust. And who knows what happens. But maybe Ben, and again, by extension, Russ, is a guy that's going to be on the market midway through the season. Maybe they get a call. You know, maybe a team really needs them, right? Maybe they get a call and you go from there. But it's interesting to know that Ben was offered a contract. That's the most important thing. He was offered a contract. He chose to decline said contract. So that tells me at least one NBA team still had interest. So let me know what you guys think. Hopefully you all enjoyed. We'll see you all later.